As a preliminary matter, this is the Tuesday, August 4th, 2020 meeting of the Newbury Conservation Commission. I'm Brian Colleran. I will be chairing this meeting. We have everybody on the agenda that should be here, and everybody's connection seems good at the moment. If the storm knocks us out, we will pause or reconvene this meeting as appropriate. So let's go through the roll call of who's here and who isn't. So let's start with Bill Holt, Conservation Agent. All right, Gretchen Gerard, Conservation Assistant, Administrator.
I'm here. I'm here. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Brian Colleran, I am here. Dan Streeter.
Here.
Ben Gehagen.
Yep.
Bill Lord. And Peter Pecos. Bill, you're here, right? You can hear me? How's your audio? Okay, thanks, Bill. And Peter.
Yes.
All right. So, good afternoon. This meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom as posted on the agenda of the Commission in our section of the town's website. Let's see. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that attendees meeting materials were provided to the board or committee members prior to the meeting for review. Applicants or their representatives may be called upon to speak and, if needed, share information to the screen. Please state your intention to do so after you've been called. Let's see, the ground rules for how we're doing this. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer or tablet or whatever you're using when you're not speaking. Please, phones with tablets or cell phones. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please be aware that video participants can, and that you should take care not to screen share your computer unless otherwise discussed. Anything podcast.
Yep. Don't know what happened. I think Brian's frozen.
Frozen in time.
Yeah, this is a. Yep. I think you're back, Brian.
You were frozen.
Yep. Still frozen. Apparently.
Back on.
Maybe, Ben, maybe you should take over, or
Yeah. We got you, Brian. Start talking.
I can.
Oh, no, I froze. I don't have the preamble. I guess I could take over.
Is he done?
I'm talking to you, Gretchen. I don't have all of the official preambles that Brian has.
Right, and I don't think he was finished.
Yep. It's an ill-fated meeting.
Yeah, he's gone. Oop, he's back.
I think he had this problem the last meeting. He was on the wrong side of the house or something.
You back, Brian?
The house is spotty in general. I tried moving last time. It didn't fix it really. I talked to Katie afterwards, and she just said it happens, and if you just wait long enough, it'll stop happening. So here's hoping.
All right, you need to finish your preamble.
Yeah. About was I doing? Let's see. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. Was that part?
I think so, if that's where you were, yes.
Okay. All right, here we go. Picking right up. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone when you're not speaking. Use earbuds with tablets or cell phones. Remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please be aware that video participants can see you and that you should take care not to stare. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by recording. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. Board or committee members should be called upon in first name alphabetical order to ease the process. Board or committee members wish to engage with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After the board or committee members have spoken, the chair will afford the public comment as follows. The chair will seek questions through the raise hand function. For video conference participants, this function can be accessed by clicking on the participants option listed in the menu below the photo gallery. Window on the bottom of this participant area, you will see the list of phone or video participants, and on the bottom, you will see the ability to click on a button to raise hand. Please ensure your name is displayed. List your name, address. Telephone participants can use their phone keypad while in a Zoom meeting to raise hand by hitting *9.
Gretchen, could you please mute
The chair will
non?
then see questions
Yeah, I
from the public
just
that
did.
have hit the raise hand button in the order. The participant will be called on to identify their name and address.
Brian. Sorry, Brian, I just muted you.
All right. Okay, yeah, so be polite when asking questions. All right. Each vote taken in the meeting will be conducted by roll call vote, and additional agenda items will be called upon and handled in the same manner. So, yay, we're done. That's good. All right, so let's get started. We'll go to the applicant first. We'll hear about anything new, and then we'll go to Bill Holt and hear what he has new to say, and then we can sort of begin the commission discussion. So Bill Manuel, I'm going to give you the floor, and why don't you run us through what you've got?
Terrific. First thing, John Colantoni took this interim time to drive over here, so he's sitting right next to me. You can see him on my screen, and he's like to say a few words.
Good evening. I just wanted to thank the commission for the site walk last week and how much time everyone spent out there. And I wish all commissions asked so many questions and got so involved. It would make things a lot easier and better projects. So thank you so much for that. And also just a big thank you for having a special meeting, which will certainly make things a lot better to be able to present and for the commission to be able to digest. I just wanted to address one short thing that really doesn't have to do with the Conservation Commission, but as we all know, public safety is always a concern of every commission and board of every town and city. And it did come up from a few of you in regard to the common driveway in the fire department. So I was able to speak to the fire chief today, as well as Keith, who is in his office. And they don't have a problem with the common driveway as long as it's 20 feet wide, which it is. And as long as it creates, I call it the Y, that might be the wrong way of saying it. So when a fire truck goes up one driveway, it can back down, turn into the other one, and then drive straight out, which is actually a bonus compared to many driveways in, Byfield, Newbury, to be able to do that. He would like our driveways to the houses at least 12 feet wide. 4 out of our 5 driveways are 14 feet wide. And there's no turnarounds necessary for the other driveways because they're all under 250 feet. And the only other thing, which is a given, is that 20 feet crossing of the wetlands. He wants to make sure it's engineered so it can hold a fire truck, which obviously it is, and Dad Barry could talk about that. But I just wanted to share that with the commission because I know that was a little bit of a concern for some of you, as well as the planning board that we'll share that with tomorrow as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it right over to Bill, my wetland specialist, and Dad Barry, our engineer, is on the line as well. And thank you again.
All right. So we walked front to back, looked at each of the lots. We looked at the wetland crossings. I think the commission got a good feel for what we've tried to achieve from the very beginning, and that is to maximize the amount of vegetation retention on the site. And we talked about why we moved the roadway, where it is to preserve a high point in the land, which allowed us to preserve probably a 1/4 to 3/8 of an acre worth of trees between lots 1 and 2. You saw the big open wooded areas between lots 3 and 4, and frankly between lots 5 and the beginning of the subdivision. When we got back to the wetland crossings, there was some discussion about having meandering lines at the interface of the wetland replication area and the uplands, and that's a good idea. In practice, generally, that's the way it turns out, unless we're obligated by some reason to create a straight line. But as a practice, if we can avoid a mature tree on the edge of a replication area or within it, we certainly like to. And we would invite a condition that would have any commission member that wants to, or Bill Holt, to be present while we're doing this excavation, or at least prior to it, so that we can flag out these trees that would be saved, and we can work around them appropriately. We talked about the edges, the back edges of these of the swales along the roadway, and it was our intention from the beginning to sort of make these BMPs invisible. As you drive down the road, you'd never really even suspect that it was a stormwater BMP along the side of the road, because we wanted this to just sort of blend in with the woods. We can easily install native shrubbery, silky dogwood, or sweet pepper bush on the back sides of the swale along the roadway to help them blend in. For the most part, I suspect the swales along lots 1 and 2, which will be right in front of a homeowner's property, they will probably be mowed by the homeowner because they'll want it to look nice, and that's fine. That keeps the maintenance up. Frankly, it gives a little less work for the town. Lots 3, 4, and 5, those are along wooded frontage, so that's where the shrubbery will kind of come in handy and allow those BMPs to blend in with the wooded backdrop. Now, Brian, you had asked about the carrying capacity of these road edge swales and whether there were any danger of them overtopping in a large storm event and possibly eroding off the back side. I consulted with Thad on this, and he can speak to it perhaps later on if he needs to, but basically the depth of flow in a 100-year storm event in these roadside swales barely tops out over a couple of inches. So the swales are highly over-designed. There's virtually no chance of these things overtopping unless there was some kind of obstruction in a storm, say a log came down or whatever. But under normal conditions, these swales will take all the water that comes in a 100-year storm event and will convey that to the proper BMP or the catch basin or BMP 2, which is the created wetland. We talked about there was the issue, Bill Holt had some comments about the common driveway, and the planning board as of the last meeting was still considering that. And I was unaware of John's conversation today with the fire chief, so that's good news, and hopefully that should put that to bed with the planning board tomorrow. Clearly, the common driveway is the best way to go on this project because what it does is it avoids the second wetland crossing to Lot 5. I could put up the plans on the screen if you'd like. If you've all seen them, I don't know if you need to allow me to share my screen, but basically, we have the common driveway because it makes perfect sense in this situation to have one crossing of the wetlands over to lots 4 and 5, rather than have two. We proved out at the very beginning to Doug Packer, and as a matter of fact, it's a sheet in the subdivision plan set, that we can do 5 separate driveways and stay under the 5,000 square foot wetland impact threshold. This is a classic case where a common driveway makes all the sense in the world to do it as opposed to a second driveway crossing. And we save or prevent the alteration of an additional 1,400 square feet of wetland impact if we were to have to make that driveway to Lot 5. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, Brian, I did get those sort of the template of the standard conditions that the commission is sort of trying to flesh out. And I also looked at the wetland replication conditions. The standard order of conditions, I've seen something very similar to that before. A lot of towns have those conditions, and frankly, I didn't have a lot to say about that. I know the wetland replication part of the project is very important to the commission, and I know you want to condition that very carefully. I did take the opportunity to go through these wetland replication conditions. And my impression was somebody wrote those for a very unpopular project and wanted to put as many hurdles in front of the practitioner as they possibly could. It's a very complicated set of conditions that probably won't work well on this project because our wetland replication areas are so small. On Lot 3, we're filling, I think, just under 500 square feet. We're creating just under 1,200 square feet. Very small area. On Lot 4, we're creating a 1,500 square foot replication area. It's very difficult. Well, first of all, a replication area of that size, we're probably going to start it at 8 a.m. in the morning and probably be done by 2 in the afternoon. It's not that complicated to dig these small replication areas. And as long as the things are marked out ahead of time, it'll be cleared, the vegetation to be taken off. We'll be able to scrape down the topsoil. We're not going to salvage anything on these replication areas because there is the European buckthorn. We saw that out on the site. And we don't want to try to salvage impact area soils that have European buckthorn in it and put that in our replication area because we'll be growing a nice crop of European buckthorn. So whatever we scrape out of either the impact area or the replication area, we might be able to use that on site for loam. after it's screened, but we're going to bring in new topsoil. We'll adjust the grade to match the grade of the adjacent wetland. We scrape that down just a little bit more, about 8 inches lower. I would be there on site during the entire time that it's being prepared, because frankly, that's the most important part of successful wetland replication. You want to have somebody experienced on site that has done this. I've done this over 30 years, and you want to make sure it's properly monitored. We get the proper interface with the wetland hydrology before we backfill with topsoil and then plant it. We would, as I said, we'd invite any commission member that wants to be there, is interested in it, just to see how it's done, or have Bill Holt come out there and be part of the monitoring effort to ensure that he's comfortable with how we're proceeding with the restoration. We backfill it and probably install the plants the next day or the day after. Yes, we do leave, there were some conditions in here about leaving rocks or coarse organic debris like logs and sticks and stuff. We try to dress up the ground surface like that as well. But your suggested conditions, they had a lot of stuff about interim reports and stopping the process and submitting a report to the commission. And as I said, these small replication areas are going to go very quickly. And I think we can flesh out a lot of the conditions that are in there to make it more appropriate for the type of project that we have. But happy to go through these if you want to discuss that tonight. But I think we have a great project. It looks like the fire chief is on board with the common driveway. It makes perfect sense. We've done everything we can to preserve as much vegetation as possible. We've got low impact development type BMPs, and frankly, with the soils out there, nice sandy soils, I think it's going to be easily constructed for John, and we're not going to have a tremendous amount of headache on this particular project. So we can talk about the roadway NOI. We can segue into all the individual lots, but I'll turn it back to you. That's the extent of what I wanted to say tonight, and let's take it from there.
All right. I think we've got a little bit of time still, commissioners, and we have time to work on that. So I don't think we need to worry about that this evening. But I do have a few follow-ups to talk about with the replication details, which we can return to. For now, though, I do want to give it to Bill Holt and let him sort of, fill us in on anything that's changed. So, Holt, how about it?
Okay. I reviewed the stormwater management that was prepared and submitted previously to see for compliance with the stormwater regulations, and I took a look at it's providing proper treatment, TSS removal. Design is a pretty good design in terms of treatment and removal, mitigating runoff rates for all the storms. It's a well done design, so I don't really have any issues with that. I know the planning board also had their consultant reviewing it, and I believe that he is satisfied with the current design. So I don't really have any issues with the drainage. I'm satisfied that the design is adequate to manage the runoff from the site. I would like to be present during all the work done on the replication areas, notification of that prior to them being done. So that would be desirable for me to have me there to review what you're doing and talking it over and discussing what changes might need to be made during the process. Other than that, I don't really have any other issues with the plans themselves. Site walk, we did note the invasive species, and I think Bill addressed that. And I did have questions on the common drive and the status of that with the planning board. I did talk to Martha, and they're not quite through that process yet. So I know the fire department was an issue, and I know that the applicant has stated that he spoke with the fire department today, and I think Martha also got some communication from the fire department regarding the width and the turnaround And if those are adequate, I think the fire department is satisfied that they'll be adequate. And I agree that the common driveway is the preferred method. I don't think a third crossing is desirable from a conservation standpoint. So with that said, I think I'll leave it to the commission to ask any questions they might have.
Thank you, Bill. So then, before we get into the rest of the commission, I was hoping that Peter could sort of walk us through some of the planning board's procedures, and hopefully we can address some of the presumed questions and comments and things we're talking about that maybe are non-jurisdictional to this body. You know, Peter can address those and sort of educate us on how some of those things will be handled there, and we can shorten this meeting hopefully. So yeah, Peter, why don't you unmute and come on in?
Great. Well, thank you, Brian. Good to be here, everyone, and good to hear the applicants make their presentation. So this is, we have kind of two boards kind of looking at this project at the same time. And as was indicated, we have a hearing tomorrow from the planning board perspective on this application. There are a couple of hurdles that the applicant has. So that would affect the design of the project. And so it's a little bit, I don't know if we're putting the cart before the horse here, because planning board hasn't made its decision as to where it stands, and there are some waivers that need to be discussed. There's a length of a cul-de-sac. There's a couple things that need to be worked out that haven't been worked out yet, which would affect the ultimate design. I'm not sure if it would affect from a conservation standpoint what the concerns are. But what I can say from a planning board standpoint is we still have some more work to do, and we'll be having a hearing tomorrow. And I know Martha will do her due diligence on making sure that highway is comfortable and that fire is comfortable and all safety issues are addressed. That hasn't been confirmed completely to the board yet, or not to my knowledge. So we still have a little bit of work from our perspective. So our component's not complete yet. So I can't say, this is a blessed plan, here you go, conservation.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So then, just broadly speaking, is there potential for something very different to end up resulting from planning, or is it just sort of details in a rough way of framing it?
Well, there are some significant waivers that are being requested, and those waivers have not been decided upon. And until the applicant can validate why the waivers need to be approved, I can't comment on it. And one of the first waivers is the length of extending the cul-de-sac from 500 feet beyond. And there are certain criteria that need to be met from a planning board perspective. And the applicant has to provide a reasonable argument that makes sense. The board says, yeah, that makes sense to us. And that hasn't taken place yet. And so from the planning perspective, again, it's the cart before the horse sort of thing. I can't tell you where the planning board is right now because we haven't gotten there yet. And I know that the applicant wants to keep the process moving. And I know that COVID and public hearings and everything being delayed is frustrating to a number of projects, but we're just trying to negotiate the best we can. And I know the applicant's been doing an enormous amount of work to try to bring this across the finish line, but we still have some things to be discussed. So that's where we're at. That answers your question, Brian.
Yeah, no, that's great, Peter. So I think the lesson that we should take is that for the moment, let's stick to sort of broad generalities and rather than drilling down too deep, like for example, about the design or control is going to move, then we can come back to that later. We don't have to get too far into the weeds on that this evening. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
So, thanks. Yeah, Mr. Manuel.
It's John Colantoni.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to, thank Peter for the feedback that he could do on the planning board. And I just want to let the commission know that we're well aware of some of the things that we have to answer to the planning board and the things that have to be discussed and the waivers, et cetera. This is no different than, any other town or city when you're going parallel with planning and conservation. With that said, yes, we were set back a lot. Everyone has been, and it's been very inconvenient, obviously, with the whole coronavirus situation. But even if that hadn't taken place, I'd be saying the same thing to the commission. We're big boys. We know if the commission approves our project the way it is, and then I'm just making this up, planning changes something, that we have to come back in, refile, and visit the commission to say, here's the change that was made to the project, here's what we'd like to do with you, and that would have to go in front of you. The commission can only look at and decide on what they're looking at, what we're presenting. And if that changes, we know we have to come back to you, and that's on us. So with due respect to the commission, I hope we don't look at this on, well, it depends what planning does or doesn't do for us to make our decision on what we're looking at, because if that was the case, we wouldn't be taking the time or spending the money to go side by side parallel with the two boards. So I just wanted to let the commission know that we understand that that's on us. Thank you.
Great. So then I do believe Ben has a series of comments he'd like to get involved with. So let's turn the floor over to Ben, and he can sink his teeth into what's on his mind.
I just wanted to add two things to what Peter was saying regarding the planning process. I've spoken with town administration via Martha Taylor as well, and it sounds like there was a miscommunication on the site visit. Perhaps DPW has told Martha that they are not currently in favor of making this a town road and maintaining it. And then further, not what Martha told me, but just town bylaws. No town can become town maintained, no road can become a town road without a full vote at town meeting. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense whether the applicants want to say they'll come back or not, for us to consider this to be a town road as we move forward when it's miles from becoming a town road as far as the process goes. I'm not comfortable with the assumption that this is going to become a town road.
We understand that. I'll give you an example. Danvers. I have a subdivision in Danvers. It's all approved, conservation, planning, the whole 9 yards. We'll probably be putting a shovel in the road in the month of August. There's no guarantee that that's going to be a town road. Once it's completed and all that, it has to go in front of a town meeting for the town vote, just as you were stating, which is 100% correct. If all of a sudden, some crazy reason, it doesn't get voted as a town road, obviously we try to do everything the way the different departments and boards want, so it has a chance of being a town road. But if all of a sudden it gets voted down to be a town road, then we have to make it an HOA, so they have to take care of their own road, the plowing, whatever the rules may be under that. So as much as we try to take the road of, no pun intended, of this being a town road in Newbury, if it didn't get voted after we're all done, then it has to become an HOA for it to be taken care of by the homeowners. So it's very similar in most communities, but I appreciate you bringing that up because that is the case and we're aware of it.
Correct, which is great. I guess what I'm trying to say is that given that I go back to the question I had at the site visit, which is nothing works in perpetuity in water. Everything needs maintenance and needs to be, well designed and properly maintained. So what I would be much more comfortable with is that you proceed with your application as though it will not be a town road, and that we don't come back to this if it does not become a town road. I'm not going to vote to approve something that isn't properly planned. So I want to see plans for the worst case scenario, not the best. Which I think is reasonable.
Yeah, that's fine. Either way, it's just an HOA agreement.
Well, no, because I mean, when I asked you about some of the storm drains and what was going to go into there, and how those are going to be maintained. I'd like to know what's going to happen, because if those backfill and overflow into the wetland, it's not the town's responsibility, it's the HOA's, and you're the one designing it. So I want to see
That's
that.
correct, but that would be one of the conditions. You're absolutely right. So if it doesn't become a town road, one of the conditions of your approval or planning's approval is that it has to become an HOA, or you don't get occupancy permit. It doesn't exist. So for us to come in and do it as an HOA, doing it the way that you want to, it won't have a prayer of being approved as a town road, because it's already a given that it's going to be an HOA. So why would they ever approve it as a town road?
That's not my issue. My issue, that's not my jurisdiction. My jurisdiction is wetlands. And so what I want to see is that the design that I'm going to approve is going to do the right thing by the resource. So the politics of whether this is going to get voted a town road or not aren't really that important to me. I'm just trying to do the right thing by the resource, which is my job. So for me, that's seeing plans so that I know if if I were to vote for this road to be approved, that it's going to be done the right way. And my assumption is going to be that it's going to have to be privately maintained.
And your concern, I agree 100% with. I think it seems like people like the design and the design will work. I think your main concern is for it to continue to work, it has to be maintained properly. Agreed?
Yeah, so I'm saying that you're going to need to amend your application to show us how you're going to do that.
And I guess we have to agree to disagree. The application takes care of that, because if it's not a town road, the only way it gets done is an HOA. That's a guarantee, and you can make that a condition.
But I want to see what I'm conditioning. I think that that's where you're skipping over something. Is I don't want to just say,
you're conditioning what you approve. Anything that you approve
give
has to be
me
maintained
something to approve, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Hold on, let's interrupt for a second. Let's interrupt.
All of this would be spelled out in the operations and maintenance plan. Who is responsible for maintenance of the road? And so that, we could start out as it would be whatever the entity is, until such time as it's taken over by an HOA or the town. So there's a during construction section of the O&M, and there's a after construction, post construction. So that will be, we'll make sure that that's highlighted for you.
Thank you.
So let me reframe that question just to see if there's a different kind of answer that falls out, and either for Bill or Thad. The way that the project is designed, what would change in the project design between the HOA maintenance plan after construction and a town maintenance plan after construction? Would all of the drainage features be sized the same? Would they all be located in similar places? What would be a couple of differences, for example?
You'd have to unmute Thad for him to speak, but Brian, nothing would change.
Nothing. Just
go ahead, Thad.
This is Thad Berry. This is Thad Berry. We have provided, which is required under the stormwater checklist, and it's also required under the MPDS permit, which we have to apply for the general construction from the federal permitting process, a pre-construction operation and maintenance and a post-construction operation and maintenance. So whether the homeowners maintain it or the town maintains it, the operation and maintenance doesn't change. It's just who's footing the bill for that maintenance. In other words, the catch basins are going to be cleaned once a year. The homeowners will have someone come in and do it, or the town will come in and do it. Now, the town has to have an MS4 permit, and specifically in the O&M that I spoke with the DPW department, my O&M, if the town accepts the road, is based on what they do and what they apply for in their MS4 permit. Whatever they sent to the federal government saying that this is how we're complying with the MS4 permit, that's what they will do for this particular roadway. But nothing's going to change. The BMPs aren't going to change. The drainage isn't going to change. The catch basin locations aren't going to change. The stormwater drainage channels aren't going to change. It's just a matter of who maintains, the system. The roadway itself is being designed to meet the town standards. The water line is being designed to meet the water commission standards. So, it's being designed, to comply with all the necessary regulations. And really what it comes down to at the very end is if the town votes to accept it, well, then they accept it and it's a public road. If they don't, it's a private road and the homeowners will have to assume the responsibility for the maintenance of the drainage structures.
So does that help at all, Ben?
Can I add to that a little, if I might?
Go ahead.
So that is correct. It's either going to be a public way or a private way. I think the concern right now is that it sounds like DPW is not willing to accept it as a public, well, it's not going to recommend it as a public way. They don't actually accept it. They make recommendations to the planning board and to the selectmen. The planning board has to make a recommendation to the selectmen in order to put it on the warrant to be accepted as a town road. And that's all done after the road's complete and they have an as-built and they see how it's all been constructed. The operation and maintenance they have right now does need to be modified. It's actually for the previous filing. I did read through it again, and I'd like to see them modify that for the current design. They've modified the number of basins and the actual BMPs they're using from what they had before. So that has to be revised to be more relevant to the current design. And then that would be incorporated into the homeowners agreement or association. And then the homeowners association would be basically a part of the deeds as well. And they'd have to agree, the people would have to know that they're going to be responsible for probably a monthly fee or a yearly fee that will be into a fund that will be maintained by the homeowners association to maintain the roadway. And if it's not looking like it's going to become a public way through the planning board process, if the planning board is indicating that the waivers are substantial beyond what is normally granted for a public way to be accepted, then they would need to have that homeowners association before they probably get approval from the planning board. That would be my guess. I'm not going to speak for the planning board, but in my experience, that's usually the process that takes place. And a condition of the approval from the planning board will be the homeowners association be prepared and included in all the deeds when they sell the properties. You don't want to throw it on them at the end when the properties are sold and it's not accepted. It's kind of hard to go back and say, okay, now we got your deed and put this on your deed. It's pretty much a done deal at that point. It's not on the deed at that point. So I think there has to be some assurance that the homeowners association will be formulated and created and agree to maintain the road if it's not a public way, which sort of sounds like, from what I'm hearing from different people, that it's not, different departments, it's not in line to become a public way from the sound of it, based on the waivers they're asking for. So it's something the applicant should certainly probably think about as they move forward with the planning board.
Thanks, Bill. Just give me a moment, Gretchen. That 203 number that called in, that's me trying to change my audio. So let's unmute that, and I'll mute my computer.
I was just going to ask you I was going to ask who that was.
Bye.
Okay, there you go.
All right, let me know if this is an improvement.
Yes, much
Oh,
improved.
Ben thinks that's improved. All right, look at me, technologically savvy. All right, well, Bill Holt, thanks for those thoughts. I'm sure that'll get covered, but at least for the sake of what we're talking about, anything that changes on the planning side that we will see come through won't necessarily affect the drainage plans. basically is what I'm hearing. Who is responsible is something a little bit outside of our jurisdiction, but if that gets cleared up sooner rather than later, that'll be dealt with over in planning rather than through us. Okay, so let's go. Dan, do you have anything you want to bring up? Or Bill, do you guys have anything you want to talk about that you'd like to cover? Bill Lord?
Wait a minute, let me unmute him.
Okay, I can start here if you want.
Yeah, Dan, why don't you go then?
Okay. So I presume we're talking primarily at this point about the hearing related to the roadway. I think
Sounds that way, yeah.
for the individual lot hearings, I'm not certain, I have enough information to focus on those at this point. Pretty comfortable with the roadway. I think an incredible job has been done to, make everything right with that. There's substantial changes. I'm reluctant to think we can close this hearing tonight on the roadway if there's major hurdles with planning, but that's just me. But generally speaking, I think we have enough information on the roadway and a reasonable amount of comfort with the plan as presented.
Okay,
Gretchen,
thank you, Dan.
Gretchen, can we mute Thad? Because I'm getting a lot of background noise off his phone.
We can. Yep, there you
Thank
go.
you.
All right, so then Bill
So,
Lord, what do
Bill?
you have on your mind? Anything?
So Bill, you just have to
Hold
unmute
on, Bill,
yourself.
you're still muted.
There you
I'm a little
There you go.
confused that I would think the point of we'd have to know who's going to maintain the road before the lots change hands. But other than that, I'm comfortable with everything.
Okay. Yeah, and that'll be dealt with, and I'm sure that'll come up again. So then in that case, let's get into, I've got a couple of comments. Oh, Ben, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not, if we're going to go on to the hearing for that, you can comment too. I just wanted to say I had comments before we get off of the road, although we might not get off the road.
No, I think personally, I would like to sort of handle these all together, unless the applicant has a reason to close out the road prior to anything else. I don't see any reason to sort of do these all separately. I'd rather sort of carry them as a pile and keep it all together in a manner of speaking. So all the dates are all the same for all of the applications and closings and, whatever else. But, I'd rather have everything in the same spot. But, that's just my take. It doesn't necessarily mean anything.
It's simpler to deal with the lots of the roads.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, frankly, it makes it simpler to deal with the lots if we know that the roadway is approved. And as far as the design, the planning board peer reviewer has looked at the design and he's comfortable with that design. Your agent is comfortable with the design. It meets all the stormwater management requirements, which is really, what the commission is here to make sure is up to snuff. So if the commission's ready to vote on the road, it sort of solidifies everything else, and things just fall into place after that. So, we would invite closure on the road and a positive order of conditions on that, and at least we can move forward.
All right. Well, so you've got that opinion. So maybe we could we'll take a sense of everybody before we finish things up then. But moving on to the comments I have that have to do with the wetland replications.
I think we're staying on
I had a
roads,
look.
right?
Oh, well, actually, to be fair, now that we're talking about this, we never actually opened which DEP we were talking about, did we? We never actually did anything to that effect. That's a good point. So let's have a look. What do we have here? the DEP number for the road is DEP number 0501326 is for the road. And then 0501325 is lot 1, 1324 is lot 2, 1323 is lot 3, 1322 is lot 4, and 1321 is lot 5. So yeah, I guess the preceding discussion was all having to do with 1326. And so, I think barring, Mr. Manuel's comment, I still don't necessarily want to move forward with the road. But, if anybody would like to offer a motion, we can certainly vote on it. But at the moment, I don't feel
I
it.
still have matters I want to bring up about the road, Brian.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I think that Newberry, we're in an interesting place where, as of right now, we don't have any formal protections for buffer zones. Informally, we have typically strongly discouraged any construction within the 25-foot buffer. And the reason that buffers are even recognized is that they protect the functions of the resource. And the burden of any application is to show that they don't negatively affect the resource. So while we don't have a formal protection at this time for buffers in Newberry, they're still connected to the health of the resource. There's clear connections to the health of the resource. So and that's the reason we've been careful about what happens in buffer zones. And I brought this up at the site walk. The road is basically 300 feet long, entirely within the 50-foot buffer, and mostly within the 50-foot buffer, and entirely within the 25-foot buffer. So if it were a protected resource in the town or had a temporary form of protection, that'd be roughly 12,000 square feet of impact. I'm really not comfortable with the site of the road. I think there's a real reason why the current road in the property is where it is and isn't bordering the wetland. And I recognize why the applicant's doing what they're doing, and they're trying to preserve the knob, and they're trying to maximize the lots on the property, which is their right. And I totally recognize that, and I respect that. But from the aspect of the resource, I don't think that this road location is in any way lessening the impact on the road or the wetland, or not impacting the wetland. I think it's certainly impacting the wetland when you put a road, 5 feet from a wetland border, for 300 feet. I don't know how you show otherwise. So I'm not very comfortable with it.
Well,
Okay.
And you did discuss that after the site walk, and we did sort of put our heads together and convene on that. It's very important in the design and the preservation of other parts of the buffer zone to position the roadway the way we have it. The narrow alignment of the parcel 108 Main Street sort of dictates how we have to enter the property. It's not as simple to say, well, why don't you just bang a hard right turn and go on the high side of that knob, because we have to comply with roadway design standards. And all that would mean, frankly, even if you'd probably end up with destroying that knob, at least a portion of it, and then putting the road through the buffer zone on the say the right side of the knob. But then that would mean the houses would have to be on the left side. So, and houses in the BMP. The site, with its geometry and the position of the wetlands and such, it almost causes a mirror image. If you were to take the road and put it on one side, the houses have to go on the other. If you put the road where the houses are, then the houses got to be where the road is, and the BMPs have to be where the road is. And let's not forget, there are wetlands on the other side of the property as well. So, I mean, the roadway and is going to be just as close on that side as it would be the way we have it. We can easily construct this because the soils are decent on the property. We can easily construct this without having any unintended wetland impacts. The Wetlands Protection Act protects the wetland. It doesn't protect the buffer zone. So that's a very important distinction for the commission to consider, is we've done our job designing it so that we pick up the stormwater and treat it properly. That's the biggest impact to the wetlands that this subdivision could possibly have. We've done our job doing that. We've done a great job maintaining the overall wooded feel for the buffer zone. We feel that where we have the road is the best location. It does happen to be close to the wetlands along that one side, but as I told you, the stormwater swales will provide somewhat of a buffer on that side, and there's no way that those are going to overtop an 100-year storm event. So, it's a balance, and just because you could say, well, let's put it to one side and preserve a lot of wetland, you're really just moving it closer to the wetlands on the opposite side, and you're just going to put the houses and BMPs on where the road is.
Can we do more plants to help this concern?
Yeah, if we need to. I mean, that was one of the things I talked about early on in my discussion about revegetating the back side of these swales. We can sort of build out that buffer zone a little bit. Once the swales are constructed, we can build that out with vegetation, and that way you capture a little bit more of a revegetated buffer zone in that area.
All right, thank you, Bill. Ben, do you want to keep going, or?
I think Bill and I have a fundamental disagreement on like ecosystem level services, which is fine. I think that, I think he's absolutely correct about the design and the engineering and the stormwater. And I meant what I said in the field, where I think they did a really nice job with that. For me, it comes down more to, you can design things really well, but you can't take away the fact that you just stripped out 12,000 square feet of buffer. And what that means for both the functioning of all the flora and fauna and how everything interrelates. So I think those are different things, and that's part of what the buffer does, and why buffers are recognized. And he's correct, in the State Wetlands Protection Act, there is no formal recognition of buffers. A lot of towns, and a lot of towns near us, do formally recognize buffers, and that's something that, I think we've discussed in the past, and maybe we'll come back to. But at the moment, we don't. But we, as I said, we've generally kept people out of the 25-foot buffer for that reason with projects.
Mr. Chair, through the chair, could I ask a question on what he was saying?
Absolutely.
Really respect everything that you said, and we had a chance to talk after the site walk as well. And if you were in favor to have the road where we have it with the design, is there any suggestion or ideas that you might have, or that we could do to make it better, like with certain plantings or anything like that? Like, because I understand your concern and respect it. I'm just wondering if there's something that we could do better to go that extra.
I mean, yeah. Personally, not speaking for anybody else, but I agree with Ben that, it is well built, it's well designed, it's well laid out as an engineering piece, but it is ecologically, you can't fix broken. If you put it there from the ecological standpoint of what buffers mean, of what wetlands mean, like the impact is had, unless you put it on stilts, essentially you'd be having that impact. And so, Ben's opinion of both disliking the ecological impact as well as admiring the engineering, it's a fair comment that I don't think they can be made to be rectified. They just, they stand apart, the two opinions. But I think I saw, Dan, did you put your hand up a second ago?
Yeah, just correct me if I'm wrong, but was there not a sidewalk parallel to this roadway on the well, the side away from the wetlands, correct?
I thought it was lines, but Bill Manuel, could you just speak to what's between the road and the wetland on that side?
Thad, you want to jump in? Thad Barry? Thad, is there a sidewalk on the, which side? It's on the uphill side, I believe.
Right, that was
The sidewalk is on the farthest side away from the wetland.
So all I'm going to suggest is, would it help if you got waved on the sidewalk and moved the road over further from the
We
wetland?
could, just to take that issue that you just brought up, there are a couple things that we can do is, even without waving the sidewalk, we can offset the road from the center line of the right-of-way. In other words, we can push the center line of the roadway is typically down the 53-foot right-of-way, or any right-of-way. But we could get a waiver, but it would be a waiver, and I can't speak to the planning board's willingness to approve that. But that's one way that we could do it. Now, as a side to that, I just recently did that in Rowley. I offset the roadway from the center line of the right-of-way specifically to fit in a sidewalk that they wanted. We had asked for a waiver on the sidewalk. They wanted one. And in order to minimize impacts, they allowed us to offset the right-of-way. It's not a really, to be quite honest with you, it's not really a big deal with the roadway. It works out fine. But again, it was something that they saw as a positive, and we're more than willing to grant that. But I can't, again, it's easy to do. It'll accomplish a lot. But I just don't know if that would be something the planning board would entertain.
And I don't know if, this would satisfy some of the concerns about the lack of the first 10 feet of buffer. If you could have 10 feet of undisturbed buffer zone, maybe that would help us.
Yeah,
yeah, it's a good idea, Dan. Thanks for bringing that up.
But there are a couple of things I want to highlight. A couple of things I want to highlight with the sidewalk. Typically, the sidewalk that we're providing is something that we need to do because it's in the planning board regulations that they want a sidewalk, and we're doing that. The sidewalk itself doesn't go anywhere. It goes out to Main Street, and there is no sidewalk for it to hook up to. And sidewalks in themselves are long-term maintenance issues for towns, and that's an issue why a lot of towns don't actively, incorporate sidewalks into their roadway systems. Obviously, it's not a bad thing to have a sidewalk. It's a good thing if there's some type of mechanism for that sidewalk to be connected to some other type of system, which in this particular case there isn't. Like I said, it's just a sidewalk going out to Main Street that I can't imagine in the near future that there'll be sidewalks in Main Street. So again, if the sidewalk was waived, then that provides even greater. But again, these are waivers that we were trying not to go for, just to, hopefully get the roadway approved. But again, those type of things are certainly very, very good tools in minimizing impacts on roadway constructions. And I've used them before in other towns at the recommendations of the towns themselves. Again, they're good tools. Whether they can be applied here, I don't know.
Okay, so thank you, Thad. I think what I'm hearing altogether is that there are some options for the applicant to reduce the impact on the buffer. And it sounds like we've got at least two commissioners who'd be very interested in seeing that happen. And so, I think personally, as far as the road is concerned, I think I would like to, see what kind of changes can be had and bring that back, at a later date and see what moves. But other than that, I don't know how much more. I feel like we've spoken about the road enough. It might be time to move on into some of the other things. Does anybody have a thought about that, about moving on and past the road and leaving this sort of we won't finish it off tonight. We'll wait and see what kind of changes come. Does that seem appropriate?
Yeah, I think the commission has given us some direction, and, we do have a planning board tomorrow, and it's a time to discuss the sidewalk waiver. Could we, if we were to go to planning board tomorrow, is that something that the Conservation Commission would be in favor of?
I think broadly speaking, the Conservation Commission, whether this one or anyone, the less impact you have on wetlands and their buffers, generally speaking, it's a plus. The other details and all the other stuff, I don't want to vouch for or put a vote or put a hand on the scale and sort of say, if you guys do this, then we support your project in front of planning board. I don't think that would be appropriate, nor the right way to necessarily take that comment. But it would certainly help to lessen some of the concerns that have been brought forward.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, does anybody want to make a motion to sort of move this to the next meeting, and we'll maybe move into some of the house lots?
I move to continue this hearing to the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, let's do a roll call. Brian Collar, and I will say aye. Dan?
Aye.
Ben?
Yes.
Bill?
He's got to unmute himself, but he said yes.
Okay, and Peter? Okay, I'm gonna have to come up with hand signals for these meetings. All right, so then let's move on to.
And Mr. Chairman, when is that next meeting?
Honestly, I'm not sure. Bill, when is the next meeting?
August 18th.
August 18th, sorry.
Okay. Do we, before we put that on the agenda for the 18th, do we want to keep this sort of separate approach? Since this seems to be a time-consuming project, do we want to continue the special meeting and do this sort of in a month rather than doing it on the 18th? And so we can give it more attention, more thought, or do we want to bring this up again at the next regular meeting? Does anyone have any opinion on that? And obviously, for the applicants, you guys, how you'd like us to handle that, that's certainly, we can take your opinion in here, but I'd hate to be having these discussions at 11:30 or midnight. That doesn't seem constructive. Does anybody have any thoughts? Yeah. Go ahead.
We appreciate the separate meeting. I agree. It makes it easier for everyone, but we also understand that it's an extra night for the commission. If you were going to do a separate meeting, would it be possible to maybe do it in August at some point?
I mean, I don't see why not. I'm waiting to see if anybody has any opinions they'd like to share. It's easy enough to do another night or another day. I don't know what anybody's feelings are about this. I suppose personally, I would prefer to do it on a week that we don't already have a meeting, just so that we don't have more than a meeting a week. It certainly helps to recover from talking about the Protection Act. but that's just me. So I wouldn't mind, what would be a week after the 18th? That'd be what, the 25th? I wouldn't mind doing something on the 25th or so. But again, that's just my opinion. Does anybody else have a thought?
Question for Bill and Gretchen. Just what's the agenda looking like for the 18th?
It is actually pretty full. I think we have over a dozen we have about 4 or 5 new applications as well as all the continued ones from before. So I think there's somewhere in the vicinity of 12 to 15 applications we're going to be hearing. And I think these 6 would make it pretty heavy. Be more like a night like we had before, unless these are shorter, unless we give them shorter time, to go over what their changes at least, so we have those presented to us so we can debate them prior to a meeting again on it. So it depends on how you want to handle these applications on the 18th. Seems to be right now more to do with the road than the lots, but I'm sure we may have some issues with the lots. But so it depends. We have quite a few on the 18th.
I'm fine with the
All right.
25th, Brian.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
I'm not available on the 25th. I have an obligation, so
Okay.
I won't be able to make it. So.
Bill Holt, do you have a day that week that would work? Maybe the Monday, the Wednesday, the Thursday,
any day but the Tuesday. So Monday, Wednesday, Thursday will be fine.
All right. And how does is there any conflict with Gretchen or Bill if you guys having a Monday or a Tuesday? Does the town need you somewhere else or anything?
I don't think so.
No, I'll be fine.
Monday's probably better.
Okay, let's go vote for Monday. Anybody? And Monday, you still good for a Monday? Sweet. I'm good for a Monday. I can make that work.
What's the date?
Anybody? The 24th.
24th.
Seem okay with you guys? Okay. All right. So then, and let's maybe, you want to do the 6 p.m. thing still, or would you like to move back to the usual 7? Does anyone have a feeling about that?
I'm just realizing I might have a conflict on the 24th. I have a meeting, but I'll try to get that entire meeting moved to a different date and time so that we can keep this on track.
Okay. Thanks, Pete. All right. So then, let's say the 24th at 6 p.m. unless Peter has an issue, in which case we can rearrange things over email, maybe to the 27th. Okay, so with that being settled, let's see, what's our next DEP number? DEP number 050-1325 for lot 1. All right. I think, at least for me personally, going through all these things, I don't have any concerns that aren't related to the wetland replication. And since the wetland replication crosses over all of the 6 different DEP numbers we have here, I'm going to save my comments for the end, if that's okay with everybody, after we go through all of these. But other than that, anybody have anything to say about the first lot? Yeah, Dan.
Hold on. Go ahead, Dan.
So it's, I think this is going to go over more than just this single lot hearing, but I think, I have not seen, we're going to be approving septic designs. I don't know that we've seen those. Maybe we have. Maybe Bill can comment on the, where we are with the Board of Health and all that.
All right, Bill Holt.
I'm not sure if they've been filed. I think it would be the applicant should answer that. And I think they, I'm not sure they filed with the Board of Health yet. The Bill Manuel or the applicant should probably answer that question.
That's correct. We have not filed with the Board of Health yet. However, we have done soil testing for each individual lot. We know where the septic system designs are going to go. And
Board of Health is out there for the perk.
and Board of Health was witnessing the perk test. So basically, we're asking for the order of conditions for the site work that's involved in Lot 1, which should include the construction aspect of the septic system. Obviously, you're not making a decision on whether it complies with Board of Health regulations or Title V regulations, just the construction aspects of it. On Lot 1, the septic system happens to be 130 feet away from the wetlands at the nearest point.
Yeah. So if I can just sort of extend that question, I think, for the most part, those septic locations are beyond the 50-foot area that we actually have some jurisdiction about. There may be some grading that is within that 50-foot zone, and again, it would kind of goes back to what we've been discussing here, just trying to keep the impacts in the buffer zone down. So if there's disturbance right up to the wetland, I mean, I haven't looked at them, and I think there's some reason to, there may be some details that would be important to us. I'm not certain of that. I think in a lot of cases there isn't, but I made the point before about the constructed wetland. If there's a steep embank, it looks steep to me from the system down to that constructed wetland. We don't know if there's a membrane installed there. We don't have those details in front of us. So I think if we proceed with any of these hearings to an order, that we're going to have to come back and talk about some details, perhaps.
Well, looking at the plans, I see that there's no membrane proposed. They are more than 100 feet with the septic leach area and tank. It's in this particular lot, it's more the house and driveway that are in the buffer zone, and obviously the roadways closer than the house and driveway to the wetlands lines. So I think their septic is outside the buffer zone. There is the constructed wetlands, but that's not considered a wetland by definition, and that doesn't have a buffer zone to it. The grading, from what I see, looks appropriate. I don't see any issues with the grading they're showing. So I don't think that in terms of the septic there'll be an issue. It's more the house and the driveway that are in the buffer zone, and the grading associated with that for this particular lot. So.
Yeah, but I think Dan's point's important because I'm looking through most of the other lots, the septic is within the 100-foot buffer.
Yeah.
So I think Dan's overall point is important.
Yeah, again, it's just a question that I had, and another, we talked on the site walk about some slopes that lead towards the wetland, whether it's, it could be somebody's yard. I think it's just, in general, on these lots, it might be helpful to have some detail about if you have a steep slope, people can't mow it. Maybe you specify conservation mix or something that doesn't need, regular maintenance. At the same time, if you have that steep slope, you provide the homeowner with some flat ground that they can actually do something on. I mean, I don't know, it's a trade-off, but I think some detail in those areas might be helpful to me. I understand if the septic system is 50 feet out and there are no construction impacts, substantive construction impacts, we don't have jurisdiction. So I'll let it go with that. Thanks.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Dan.
as Bill Holt said, this is Bill Manuel, lot one's pretty benign. The constructed road will be in between the house lot and the wetlands. The road will be constructed first so that all the erosion controls will be in place, the swales would be in place, and this would be on the opposite side of the road. Frankly, there are no steep slopes on this lot. Everything looks like it's on the order of 6-to-1 to 10-to-1 grading. Lot one's pretty benign. The foundation is 80 feet away from the wetlands across the road.
Okay, anybody else want to discuss anything about, yeah, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, my comments for lot 1 and lot 2 are the same as my comments for the road. Lot 1 and lot 2, the entire driveway and dwelling are within the 100-foot buffer. So the entire project, proposed construction projects inside the 100-foot buffer zone. And I just can't, I have trouble squaring that with anything helping or protecting wetlands resources. And we ran into this, for me, I ran into this when the off Rolfs Lane project that we had last year, where almost the entire project was in the buffer zone, and we had a lot of discussion about that. I don't really want to, I can rehash it here. I don't really want to, but I think that I really appreciated what Mr. Colantini had to say when we're talking about the road. And I just think for me, the fundamental thing is like, when you look at the overall scope of the entire application and the composition, the proportion that's within wetland buffer, it's really hard for me to look at that and say that the resource isn't being harmed. So that's just where I am. So that's my comment for this lot and the other lot. Otherwise, I don't have much to say about it.
Okay. Excellent.
By other lot, I meant lot 2, sorry.
Right. Anybody else want to speak?
Anybody else want to speak to lot 1?
Ooh, sorry. Sorry, I just unmuted myself and made an echo. My mistake. Anyway, any other commissioners want to speak to lot 1? Going once, going twice. Okay. So with nothing else to talk about there, shall we move this to the, what did we say, the 24th? We can move on to lot 2. Humoring a motion?
So moved.
Excellent. We got a motion from Peter,
Second.
Daniel, and from Ben. All right. So for myself, I'll say aye. For Ben?
Aye.
All right. Daniel?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And Bill's got a thumbs up there, so that counts. Thank you, Bill. All right. So let's move on to the next one. Which one is the next one? Oh, all right, so lot 2 is DEP number 0501324. I think Ben and I have said our pieces about this. Does anybody have any new commentary or new thoughts on what's going on with lot 2? This is the one that has the predominance of the constructed wetland, the drainage feature.
I would say that constructing a wetland in the buffer zone seems a little strange to me, but I don't know where else it would go.
Right.
You know, you're tearing out buffer to put in a constructed stormwater. It'd be nice to find a place to put the stormwater handling stuff. That Bill's manual, is that the reason for this? Am I remembering that correctly?
That's correct. This is a stormwater BMP.
Right. Yeah.
Ultimately, it has to drain somewhere, and that is ultimately it has to go to the wetlands, and it has to be able to be in a position in the landscape where stuff can drain to it. So anywhere on the outside of the buffer is going to be a high spot in the land, and it won't work.
Yeah, like I said, it's difficult. There's constraints, but it does seem strange. I will say, I don't know about other people. I'm always, just for me, is like a weird little technicality. Maybe I'm the only one. I won't belabor it, but when I get plans, it's for like multiple features within a landscape. It's really nice if they're all in the same geographical reference. So like the set we got from Thad is like, half of the plans have north going one way and half the plans have north going the other way. You know what I'm saying? So if you want to get everything in the same geospatial frame of reference, you have to rotate half the plans so they can link together.
Yeah, I know that
As
too.
a thought for the future, like when I'm reviewing these, I find it really easier if I can do that without having to move stuff around, if that makes sense. Totally not about anything too important, just as future applications.
Well, if nobody else is going to bring up anything, I have a question sort of kicking off of what Ben said. This is a constructed feature. Is there a way to accomplish something similar without all of the construction or destruction, as the case may be? I think what, Ben's point is that, you're putting in this feature and removing intact buffer. And is there a way to utilize the intact buffer in a manner that, just reduces engineering? As a deeply oversimplified example, just putting in a berm of earth so that the water hits the berm and flows through the woods until it enters the wetland, where you choose. I know that's obviously never going to work, but just as an oversimplified example, just to toss out there, is there some way to do less and accomplish the same thing?
Well, Brian, interesting that you make that observation. Remember back to our option number 1, our first submittal. Remember, we had 8 different small BMPs that we spread out over the site. Now, there still was a BMP, I forget what they called, I think 4 and 5 on lot 2. There were 2 smaller individual BMPs to treat stormwater. And that's what basically the preamble, the direction of the stormwater management guidelines direct a person to do, a practitioner to do when you want to break up the water flow and treat it where it originates as opposed to collecting it. Now, because of many smaller BMPs, we ran into problems at the peer review level where they said, you're calling it a pocket wetland, which it was. We definitely were intercepting the hydrology and it was a constructed wetland, but it didn't, because of the limited area, we couldn't create a high marsh, a low marsh, and a deep pocket and a sediment forebay on each of these wetlands. So it didn't look like the classic picture if you flipped open, volume 2 of the stormwater management and you went to, let's just call it
Bill, let me interrupt you for a second. I think I need to go say goodnight to my kids. I'll be right back.
Okay. Very important.
Yes.
Oh, your daughter's a star now.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Keep your priorities straight.
Hey, I'm just a tenant. I don't really run this place.
So, it's that that classic duel between, you know, submittal, peer review, what does the Concom want, what does the planning board want, and so, you know, we had to adjust our design to comport with the opinion or the view of the peer reviewer.
Okay.
And I'll give him some credit. I'll give the peer reviewer credit. I mean, I respect it, Joe. I've known him a long time. And his comments were related to the treatment, because frankly, the treatment of the stormwater is affected by the travel through the different marshes and the retention in the deep pond. So, you know, without that sort of deep pond creation, that his concern was that we weren't going to get treatment that we needed to get. And he couldn't relay to the planning board that with confidence that the stormwater was going to be treated by the time it was discharged. So that was his concern. It wasn't like, hey, I don't like your design. I want to see a different design.
Yeah, I'd like to take that off though, Bill, a little bit, in the sense that in actuality, the treatment that we had originally done in the spread out BMPs is superior to what we're doing now. It's common sense. When you're dealing with stormwater runoff, the reason the DEP requests that engineers break the drainage areas into small subcatchments is that you're minimizing the amount of concentrated stormwater flow, and thus you're minimizing the amount of pollutant within that stormwater. Now, if you combine that small pollutant, that small unconcentrated flow through grass swales to small pocket wetlands, your treatment is far superior because you maximize two things. You maximize the soil's ability to infiltrate that runoff, and you maximize the water's contact with a vegetated surface. So that's the specific reason it's called low impact design. It is the specific reason that DEP wants you to do that. So if you look at the DEP regulations, they specifically tell you that the wetland that they reference in that book, that picture, the low high marsh, is for a wetland. If it's a true wetland, it has to have a drainage area of 10 acres contributing to it. If it's a pocket wetland, it has to have an area of 2 acres draining to it. In this particular case, what we've done in order to make that work is we've dug holes into the ground in order to pond water. The ponding of the water provides no treatment of the stormwater runoff other than providing a different type of environment for different types of vegetation. However, if you have a pocket wetland that has a dense vegetated surface that allows the water, which we had originally done, to disperse evenly over a large area, again, you maximize the infiltration, allow the maximum settlement and treatment. That's just called low impact design. And that's why in the very first part of the stormwater checklist, they specifically asked the engineer, have you considered these design options? And we did. The other aspect of the smaller BMPs, that we were able to locate them within areas that we were already doing construction. And although you were saying that we didn't have sediment forebays, we actually did. They were small, because when you calculate the volume of sediment required in a sediment forebay, these small drainage areas, they don't even produce any real sediment. And they also in the regulations say there are considered flows, runoff flows, that are insignificant in producing pollutants off surfaces. Under the original design, every one of those BMPs had insignificant flows, 0.24 cubic feet per second. It's not even a real number. So ultimately, that's the way to treat stormwater management. And it's again, I want to emphasize the fact that if you go through the stormwater handbook, you will see that before you get into all the details, that's the first thing. There's this right in the beginning of the book that they kind of emphasize that the designer look at and do.
Okay. Well, thanks, Thad, covering that.
But basically, the project has morphed, Mr. Chairman, so that we do have a concept that has been acceptable to the peer reviewer. And it still works itself into the environment fairly well. So we've got another way to skin that cat.
Okay. I think I do have one question to go along with it. As we talk about all of the constrictions on this site, and how you want to put this feature in the wetland buffer, which, as Ben mentioned, has its own value. If there is a way for less impact to take place, that would be helpful, obviously. Do you mind speaking to the topic of permeable pavers and just ways to perhaps not have water in the first place, sort of on-site infiltration with permeable paver type choices? And while you do that, I'm going to try to figure out how to turn my light on without blinding you guys.
Okay. We've already done a great job on each individual lot. We're picking up the roof runoff and we're infiltrating that into underground chambers. So we've gone to great strides to minimize runoff from the roof surfaces. The road, most of this water that's going into this BMP2 is coming from the roadway, and we can't have permeable pavers or something like that on the road. It has to be durable and plowable. So we have utilized a system where the system is frankly as small as we can make it. We don't want to make it any bigger. It just costs more money. But I just wanted to mention that, we have looked at other ways, such as picking up the roof runoff, to minimize the amount of runoff from each of these sites.
Okay. Speaking
Chair.
to what you said about durability, just because I'm sure very few of us here are well educated on the pros and cons and quote unquote, the durability of some of these things. What are some of the, the more technical aspects of why they won't work? You mentioned durability and all that. Maybe you could just sort of go down that rabbit hole a little bit.
Hold on one second before we do that. Mr. Chairman, I have 5 minutes before I lose my childcare.
Yeah.
So if you want to formally continue this meeting, you might need me to do that.
It's true. And to do all of the other details for the rest of them. All right, so then let's wing this a little bit. Would anybody be opposed to formally continuing the rest of these DEP numbers with Ben here? And then we can sort of continue the discussions of them. I don't know how this works with open meetings and being on Zoom, but, and I don't know if it matters if Ben leaves, if we still have quorum to continue. These are all the finer points of this stuff that I really don't know. Does anybody have a thought on how we ought to proceed appropriately? Either Peter, in your own role as chair, or Bill Holt, or Bill Manuel, if you've had any experience with other people having to leave Zoom meetings in the middle of commissions. Anybody have any thoughts? Yeah, Peter.
Ryan, Ben, you need to be present for for this vote to take place.
I would think so, correct? To formally continue the meeting?
Okay. If you need his vote to continue the meeting, and you need to take it in the form of a motion, you're probably going to have to do that to continue it, and which would mean you'd probably be including your discussion on the other 3 lots at this point in time.
Right.
And it looks like John and Bill and Thad, looks like we're going to be coming back on the 24th to discuss these things. And if you can have offline discussions with Bill Holt and Gretchen if necessary, that might be able to tie up things so that when we reconvene on the 24th, things will be in an active mode with regards to lots 3, 4, and 5, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I don't think we have much of a choice in this situation, so.
My apologies. I just had I was not
We all
able
got
to.
our priorities.
Yep.
And the difficulty of negotiating everything in the world of Zoom and modification. So everybody's cooperation and understanding is, it's appreciated. So thank you, Bill and John and Thad for that. And I think, Ben, it makes sense for you to submit a motion.
Thank you.
That's okay with you, Brian. Sorry.
Absolutely. Let's do what Peter said.
I second it.
Yeah.
All right. So then let's do the roll call vote to move this. What DP number are we on again?
25.
25 to continue 050-1325 until the 24th.
24,
right?
sorry. We're at 124, sorry.
Right.
13,
Okay,
25.
good.
Sorry.
So Brian Collin, aye. Dan?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Peter?
Yes.
Okay, good. So then I'm gonna batch open these other 3 so we can batch forward them and get out of here on 1 vote instead of on 3 separate votes. So let's open up DEP number 050-1323, 1322, and 1321 for lots 3, 4, and 5 respectively. All right, and now let's have a motion to move these also to the 24th.
So moved.
Second it.
Excellent, thank you. And so I will vote aye. And then Dan,
Yes.
Ben,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
thank you, and Peter.
Yes.
Okay, good. So that's all opened, closed, and forwarded. So thank you, Ben. You're all set.
My
And
apologies
we'll see you
again,
next
guys.
Good night, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Good night, Ben.
time. All right, so then I still want to bring up the wetland replication. Are there any other generalities that folks want to get into? No? Okay. So my observations about the wetland replication, there's 2 or 3 related pieces. One is that the wetlands being replicated as laid out are very close to the roadways, and much to Ben's point about, not having wetlands near construction. Your wetland buffer has a purpose. I would be more comfortable trying to find room to relocate the replication areas. Let me just look. The back of certain lots looked like they had opportunity on paper, and I don't remember any reason from our site walk that they might not work in the field. I'm looking at the boundary of lot 2 and lot 3. There's an adjacency to the wetland there that doesn't look like it's being utilized for anything else. The back corner bounding lot 3 and 4, there's also an empty spot there that we never actually got back to. Or maybe where the whole property kind of corners, and we're on lot 5, that's also further away from the development being proposed. I would be interested in seeing the wetland replications moved away from the development to the greatest extent possible. I know that may not be realistic depending on certain circumstances, but I would like to see I would like to see something about that. The other thing is that having a look at the replication, the planting list of what plants, which is nice to see. It's a rare bird to be able to look at that kind of thing laid out right nicely on the plan like it is. So that was nice, Bill. But just when we were on our walk, I wasn't botanizing, but I don't recall seeing the silky dogwoods or the high bush blueberries. Like I said, I wasn't botanizing, they very well could be there. But I would not like to introduce new plants to the system if possible. I would prefer to keep the ecology as intact as possible, you know, by sort of, to the greatest extent possible, sticking with what's on site. I know some things aren't necessarily commercially available, but I would like to see an inventory of the species you've actually got that you're actually displacing, rather than sort of, you know, the usual suspects, if you will, being on the plant list. And the comment you made earlier about bringing in topsoil and taking out the soil on site, I understand your reasoning. I think it's good reasoning. There's nothing wrong with preventing invasives. However, there weren't that many buckthorn in there in those woods, relatively speaking. And I think there's a greater value in using the hydric soil on site, which is adapted, you know, the microbiota is adapted to the local hydrology already. I think you were going to have better success with reestablishing using soil from on site, and invasive species control is going to be built into the monitoring protocols. And so, you know, it's a good point. We don't want to be using invasive seed from on site, but we also don't know what's in the soil you'd be bringing from off site. And we do know that it would not be a hydric soil. And so I would like to see, that sort of reframe to use the soil from the site and to, you know, just deal with any invasives that we happen to encourage. I think it's a more ecologically useful than detrimental aspect of things. And then just broadly speaking, you know, I do agree that the conditions that we shared around, they were built for bigger projects, sure. However, even small wetland replications are still important, and I think that the moral to take from the language being passed around isn't so much what will end up in the conditions or not, but that it is we are invested in making sure that the replication gets done well. You know, there's so many reasons, whether they're board imposed or, you know, contractor imposed, for replications to have trouble. And so, you know, if we can address any of the known problems beforehand and sort of get those out in the wash, that would be preferable to, you know, failing and having to fix something later. You know, so doing the work up front and keeping track of things tightly, I think is, you know, the real gist of what should be taken from this. You know, like the micro topography, you know, I don't think is going to be really an issue on this particular site. It all seems pretty dull from that perspective. But, you know, a lot of the other things like maintaining reports, maintaining photo documentation, you know, this is the kind of thing that when we are all long gone and somebody else is in this spot looking at this wetland replication, I want them to be able to look at what we did and understand it and reconstruct it. And if they need to adjust anything, they know, you know, what's been done before. So that's where I'm coming from on that. But if anybody else wants to bring anything up, I think I am, you know, I think I'm running out of comments.
If nobody wants to jump in, I would like to just comment on several things that you touched on, Brian. The reason we selected the location of the replication areas is, frankly, it's kind of 180 degrees where you want to go. We selected it because it's appropriate. Number one, we can attain the hydrology, but it's also close to development that's going to happen as a result of the project. If you were to try to move the replication areas back further away in some of the areas that you had mentioned, you have to create access to those areas, which means cutting down buffer zone vegetation, creating a roadway to be able to back a dump truck in there, or at least a very minimum a skid steer with repeated trips back and forth. We always try to select a gently transitional area or a flat area that happens to be close to a driveway crossing, or the point of impact. That frankly, that's what the performance standards tell you to do, is be as close to the point of impact as possible. So we can look at alternative areas, but I mean, I think some of the areas that you had suggested, they're going to require more work and more buffer zone disruption. I just want to
right, and that's
walk
expected.
through the thinking.
We didn't walk those sites with that in mind. And if there's if it's 6 of one and half a dozen of another, so to speak, keeping things where they are is not a bad choice. But if we are going to sort of impact as much buffer as we are alongside the construction area, I would prefer not to remove more buffer that is currently lying between the wetland and the road or the house or the lawn or whatever, and replace it with wetland, because that wetland is going to be harder to establish. It's going to suffer, more stresses by being close to the lawn, by being close to the driveway, by being close to the road. I would like to give that wetland the best chance it has to function in an ecologically meaningful way, and then preserve the buffers that otherwise would be lost, because those buffers then provide their own values. But, I take your point. It may not work. It may cause more damage than not. But then again, it might not. We haven't, in a manner of speaking, we haven't looked at that yet. And I'd like to have a look at that.
Is that something that maybe you and I can convene, walk the site and hash this out? Because basically, if you don't like where I put it, tell me where you want it, and then we'll design it to where you suggest is a good alternate location. But
I'm okay with doing that, but I don't want to sort of make the decision in the field. I want to make sure that if Kevin is at the next meeting, that he has a chance to speak to it, and if Ben wants to speak to it. So I'm happy to sort of go over my own personal preferences, but the changes that might make in the plans and might raise other concerns with other members, and I don't want to cause a fuss with that. But I am happy to go for a walk and sort of make my own opinions known on site. And I'm happy if anybody else wants to come join me. It's not just doesn't have to be just a me thing. Bill Holt, if you want to come along as well, obviously. But I'm happy to share and work through some of those on site at some point.
Mr. Chair, would you consider if we kept them in the locations that they are, but did the other things that you were suggesting in regard to, I may say it wrong, so I apologize, but not removing the soil and bringing soil in to keep the natural soil that's there, not worrying about getting rid of the bad species because you don't feel that there's not as much there. Some of that stuff, but keeping the locations the same.
Maybe. I don't know. In a manner of speaking, I'd have to think about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, the rest of your comments, it's probably something better that we look at on site. I tell you, I'm not in favor of using the on-site soils, just in my experience over the years. Number one, there's not enough of it because usually the hydric soils are very thin. We'd have to import topsoil anyway, but I'd rather not deal with European buckthorn. It may not, because it's the canopy is fairly shady in there now. It may be suppressing some of the shrub growth, but when you turn that over, disturb it, you basically release it, and that's where you're going to see a profusion of all the root stock and seed stock that's in that soil. So I think we're sort of poking the bear there, but either way, whatever your preference is, whatever the orders of conditions are, but I'm not in favor of using soils that are contaminated with buckthorn.
I take your point, and I understand it. The problem that I think is going to happen regardless is that the buckthorn is going to be released. When you take down that much canopy and you open up that much light, in a manner of speaking, the buckthorn is going to be the least of the problems. Everything's going to blow in and come down that road, and the boundaries will be invaded with, half a dozen other things, probably before the project is, finished and sold and everything's done. I think no matter what choice we make, invasives will come in and grow and thrive, buckthorn and otherwise. And so rather than sort of losing the value is in the hydric soil, however, the claims may not work out. It is local soil, that has a value too. I agree with you fully. It's just, I disagree with maybe your hopefulness that this project won't, go bad anyway with invasives. But yeah, we can go through these finer points of ecological succession, when we do the site walk and figure out what is a better or worse choice according to me about where a wetland ought to go.
Okay.
And again, and whoever else is more than welcome to come along.
Yeah.
If you want,
And we will send a message out about that.
if you wanted to coordinate it through me, I'll talk to Bill tomorrow. We can coordinate some dates and send them out to everybody and see who's
that'd be
available.
good.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. That would be good. Okay, so barring any other comments, I think that nobody's raising their hand or speaking up or adding to this, that it's safe to say we can have a motion to close the meeting and move on. Is anybody? I see a nod from Peter in the negative.
Well, we want to continue this. We want to continue this hearing.
Yes, sorry, you're right. Well, we continued the DEPs, but we closed the meeting, right?
We can adjourn for the evening.
Yeah, this was sort of just discussion after. I thought we already closed all the hearings and continued them to the 24th.
Yes, yeah, technically because we needed Ben there, but I think we also are technically still in an open meeting.
I motion we
And so we need
adjourn
to-
the open meeting.
Right, we've got to adjourn the meeting, but we've
Second.
closed
Second, Bill.
all the, yeah.
Let's vote
Right?
on it.
Am I getting this right?
Motion made and seconded.
All right, brilliant. Well then, let's do our roll call. I'll vote aye. Dan,
Yes.
Bill,
Aye.
thank you, and Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, so good. The meeting's officially closed. We've got something set up for the 24th. And Peter, do let us know if that's not going to work and we can tweak things. And then Bill Holt and Bill Manuel, we can figure out a visit for the wetland thing sometime prior to that.
Okay.
Right, everybody good?
Thank you
Alright.
so much. Appreciate all the time.
Have a good evening.
All right, thanks
Thank
everybody.
you, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.